Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas.
And I'm SuzanneSPSDLA.
We're coming to you from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in the Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
Thanks for joining us today. In case you missed it, we have just a single news announcement for you, and that is all about the blogs. So this past week, the latest blog that went out was all about using Discovery Ed beyond Board Builder. So I don't know how many of you have ventured out into Discovery Ed, but it has more function and capability than Board Builder. There is hundreds and hundreds of lesson plans. There is a whole Discovery Education Network that's, if you go back and listen to Lisa Bukowski's interview, principal from Bolin, she actually talked about going on a trip, or a conference, I'm sorry, not a trip, a conference, to meet with all these other educators who are Discovery educators. They call it DEN. You can look at that. There's links in the blog to that. And the prior week was actually all about H5P and how you can use that to integrate next generation test questions into your content area. Not the assessments, but the content. So go check those out. We are loving to hear feedback from you, so you can always comment in our Yammer group.
That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Takes.
Thanks again for joining us today. We are on the last part of our conversation of blended learning. It's been a very interesting conversation that we've taken, and Suzanne and I have learned a lot from it, and we hope that you guys have too. Again, if you have any comments or questions or even how-tos with doing blended learning, remember to email us at DLA support, leave us a message on Yammer. So without further ado, here's the last part of that conversation. A lot of benefits that we've kind of laid out over the last little bit of time. So some of the possible negatives, and I think the benefits outweigh the negatives a lot. Some of the negatives is the teacher insecurity of not knowing how to do something. And guess what, Springfield? You have 4 people who are dedicated to helping you become better with using technology in the classroom. 2 of them are talking to you right now. And so don't be afraid to reach out to us at DLA support.
At any time.
At any time. This is what we want to do. Whether we create a Skype meeting and we can meet that way, whether we start doing our own webinars, whether we go out to your school and go visit you in your classroom. I know from my experience, if I had someone who was willing to sit in my room while I'm trying something out and able to give me pointers or things that they saw that worked and didn't work, because I'll admit, in the moment of teaching, I always think everything's going wrong, even if it's going right or well, or that it's going bad. It's hard to, it's easy to self-reflect after the fact, but you tend to miss things when you're self-reflecting because you're trying to think of the whole thing. It's good to have another pair of eyes. And so if you're wanting to try some of this blended learning stuff, contact us. We will assist you. And we are a judgment-free zone like Planet Fitness. Because we want you to be better. We don't want you to be afraid to try things. And so that, to me, that's one of the negatives that come up with blended learning is that fear.
Right. And every time you talk, Mike, I end up having 3 different thoughts, and then I got to remember my thoughts. But one of them was, yes, we will absolutely help you in any way we can. That's what we're here for. But we also want to be able to increase your network of people that are easily accessible to you to help you with any and all of your technology issues. So you've got a technology coordinator, hopefully in your building. Some of you may have an IT teacher who may be the person that you go to. At the end of the day, we want to help you. So then someone else in your building, they say, hey, I know who knows how to do that. And that network has just been increased by 1. And then if any of you remember the Farrah Fawcett shampoo commercials, and she told 1 friend, and she told 2 friends, and she told 2 friends, and so on and so on and so on. We want more and more people to be comfortable with technology, blended learning, but we're here to help.
Who's Farrah Fawcett?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was I know who she is. She was a Charlie's Angel, wasn't she?
Yes.
See? Was she also in Three's Company?
No,
that was somebody else.
Yes.
I don't know much about that commercial, but that's what we want to do is we want to help you. I feel strong enough to say that we do believe in blended learning, and we do believe that it can help you improve student outcomes. One of those negatives of this could be that fear. I think another negative that we worry about is screen time. As you'll hear in an interview later on this month with one of the people I was talking with, one of the things they said, interestingly enough, is students are going to have screen time no matter what. Whether they're watching a YouTube video or watching you teach, what matters? It matters that they're watching you teach the lesson. And so why not take what they're already doing and make it educational? And so they're already having screen time. And especially for you middle school and high school teachers, you can't stop it. You can only try to limit it within your room, but I think you'd be doing a disservice to those students because they're already doing it. And why not take advantage of something your students are already doing, which I think is very key. To me, that kind of alleviates that argument of, well, they're already doing it. I'm not going to go home and monitor them. I'm now giving them something to watch instead of going to watch that rap video for the 7th time.
Right. I think what it speaks to, Mike, is even though some students might have a very limited attention span, their need or desire to be on a screen, whether it's their cell phone or a video game or the TV, whatever it is, in my opinion, speaks to they can't stand to be idle or bored for 1 second. And that's where they're going. But if the teacher has put together a lesson plan that engages them, they're going to go there for that distraction. It's not going to be sitting and reading 50 pages of a book or doing 10 worksheets. It's going to be something that excites them and interests them. And that's where they're going to go for that quote unquote distraction, but they'll be learning.
Yeah, that's taking advantage of what they're already doing. I guess to me, those are kind of like the two bigger fears that I would see with blended learning. Is there anything that you think, anything I'm missing, Suzanne, that you can think of?
No, I really don't want to speak much to the fears because, as you said, I'm all for it. And I see more hope and optimism when it comes to blended learning than any of the fears that I read about. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, in the Washington Post article where there was a whole conversation of negativity regarding blended learning. I just don't even want to entertain it. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it will happen. As you said, the robots and all of that, it's not going to happen. I refuse to believe that will ever be the case where technology takes the place of teachers simply because it's less expensive or cost effective for somebody out there in this country, according to the author of that article, who happens to be from Canada, not even the United States. So I'm not going there. I'm all for it. I think it's awesome, and I think the kids will love it, the teachers will love it, and it can only get better from here on out.
I agree with all of that. One of the things I was thinking about with the whole idea of cost effective, well, schools have a budget. And they have a certain amount of money they have to spend. It'd be more cost effective to have some of the materials digitized online because that's always cheaper. Think about when you buy a Kindle book. If I want to buy the latest book from John Green, it's $17.99 in Barnes & Noble or Walmart or wherever you go and buy books. It's in that price range. Online, you can find that book for $10.99. That's a $7 difference. That $7 now can be put towards something else. And so that same mindset of if I can digitize my textbooks on the computer, well, that's $20 to $120 per student that I now don't have to spend on textbooks that I can put towards something else. And if we think about like school budgets and how they're always being cut and things are always being cut, and the things that get cut are things that we're like, oh, they really need. If you're not having to buy textbooks every year or every couple of years and you're saving $100,000 because you're not buying that many textbooks, I don't know. I'm just making numbers up right now.
I am not the budget expert, Mike, so I'm not.
So what I'm trying to get to is then that money could be used towards enriching the school in other ways instead of here's another textbook, here's another textbook, here's another textbook. Because we tend to go through textbooks quickly because they become quickly out of date. The moment that they're published, they become out of date, which is a sad fact, but we're so conditioned to buying textbooks Like, I know for when I was in school, in college, I had the option to get digital books. This was early on in digital textbooks. Some companies had it. Some teachers were like, these are the books I want you to use. Well, I had the digital copies, and I spent a quarter of what other kids in my class went, because they went to the bookstore and spent that $120 on a textbook, or that $210 on the textbook and the CD-ROM, when I bought it online for $30. And so,
making me feel old, Mike.
Did not mean to do that. But that's part of the reality is, like, our budgets are tight as it is. We're already spending money on the LMS. We're already spending money on textbooks. We're already spending money on all these things. Where are the ways that we can save money so we can do other things, like have field trips again, or have music and art, and not have just one or the other, but like have both in the school, have gym every day. Like, I think blended learning, like, when you're thinking about saving money, that's, to me, where the money becomes saved, because it allows the resources in the school to become better allocated. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
It does,
if I were starting a school, if I were in charge of creating a new school, that's where I would start. Is
Mike's new school. This is
digital textbooks, blended learning, every classroom.
I hear what you're saying, Mike, and again, I'm not an expert in budgeting, but I understand your point, and I think it's well made. In the end, it's all about creativity, right? And how we can best teach our students given the tools we have today.
Mm-hmm. And then again, if we're doing blended learning, I think about the last year that I taught, I had to purchase myself notebooks because I wanted students to be writing in notebooks. This is before I knew we had OneNote, or what OneNote was, or was capable of. And so I know I spent, like, that last year teaching, I probably spent $600 to $700 just buying supplies for my school year. When the reality is, if I'd known that I could have done more of this blended learning online, that's my own money I'm keeping instead of spending on the classroom. Or I could spend it in other ways, which would help improve the quality of my room and help me become a better teacher.
Not that I know we're probably running out of time, Mike, but something for our listeners.
We're not running out of time.
Well, you and I could talk for hours. We know that. One question I have, and I don't know if you have an answer, but I'm curious to know what our listeners think. When it comes to blended learning, what are colleges doing today to prepare our teachers to teach this way? And I don't know the answer. I
definitely don't know the answer, because that was not anything that I took. And even some of the teachers that I've interviewed for the podcast that are like newer teachers who have gone through school much more recently than I have. And it's weird to kind of say it that way, because last time I was in college was 10 years ago, other than starting to take some classes through Leslie. How teacher prep programs are nowadays, like, they still didn't even have like this same type of trainings with using technology. I think if you go back and listen to a couple of the different podcasts with some of the newer teachers, you'll hear them say that. And so, to answer your question, Suzanne, I don't know, because it's a vast world of tools out there. You might, as a teacher in a program, you might learn about a few of the tools to use, but you're not going to learn about everything you need.
Right. And I know when I got my master's in education, I learned about, overall classroom management, right? The tried and true practices that the professors gave us. I learned about centers and how to run centers in your classroom. But when it comes to blended learning, there wasn't a specific course for that. And I think there should be.
Well, maybe that's your $1 million idea.
There you go.
But I think another thing, too, it would be important to talk about is, like, how do we get started with it? So, Suzanne, what are a few of your tips that you would say help us to get started with blended learning?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, Mike, is the SAMR model, and how this, equates to some extent to thinking, how am I going to get started in going up the levels on SAMR model? So do a simple substitution. And there you have some of your class person to person talking usual way, and then you've got your students on the computer using technology.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great way to start, especially with your substitution. Instead of the student watching you at the beginning of class, they are now watching a video of you at home before they come to class. That's substitution right there. Because substitution really is just what is the difference between if I were in a room and not in a room.
Mm-hmm. And even with that example, Mike, not to mislead people to think that blended learning always has to include that at-home component. It can still be all within a classroom.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the tips that I would give is be patient. Like we have access to so many tools and so many ways to do this. When you're trying out something that's brand new to you that you may never have done, be patient. It might not work right away, and use the people around you that you can. There's this wonderful tool, Suzanne, called Yammer. And if you post a question on there, generally people respond. And so it's a great way to connect with other educators in Springfield that know how to do it. I've also learned that if you post questions out on Twitter or you direct message people on Twitter, they get back to you, which is great. So that would be like another way to like, hey, I'm really trying to use this tool, but I'm stuck with A. Can you help me get through this part? Is there somebody out there who knows how to do this? Like, I think when it comes to blended learning, because there's so many ways to do it, that you kind of have to just pick something to start with. And like, you might think big picture, like, I'm going to do my entire class of blended learning. And that's fantastic. But you need to start small. You need to start with one little thing, especially if you're not a tech savvy person.
Right.
Because you'll get frustrated with the technology not doing what you want it to do. And who knows, you might be using the wrong tool trying to get that out there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Exactly. And I think we say that so much of the time, Mike. Start small. Start with one thing that you're comfortable with. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Take your time and allow yourself that time to make those mistakes within that particular lesson.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great tools out there. Like, in thinking of math in particular and some science, the Khan Academy videos is a great place to start with blended learning, because if you're not comfortable like creating your own video lesson, you're still trying to learn how to do that. They've already done some. So not only do they have examples, you could also just use them as your example. I can't tell you how many times teaching 5th grade in the last few years that I taught, that on day 1, I would teach the lesson, the I do, we do, you do. Students would seem to get it, and it'd be okay. And then we'd come back to a few days later to prepare for the end of that week quick formative assessment that I would do, and the students would have no clue. Or they didn't understand it at first, and then I put on the Khan Academy video, and Sal says almost the exact same words that I say, and then you hear, "Oh, I get it now. You didn't explain it to us that way." And I swear, I don't know how many times I just wanted to like throw my head into the wall after those comments, because I said the exact same words. And so there are great teaching videos out there that model at the way that you teach. They're modeled after the way you teach. You just have to search them out. Khan Academy for me, and the way I would describe teaching math, was great because it was almost the exact same words.
And just so you don't feel too bad, Mike, I do remember reading in one of these articles that many times a Khan Academy video is no different than you standing up in front of the classroom saying the exact same thing. But the difference is that the student can view it at their own pace. So they could watch a minute of it and go take a break, or they could watch it 20 times. You know, it is the same information. It's not any more exciting or not exciting, but it's the fact that they're doing it at their own pace. So don't feel
it's not
too
any
bad.
more exciting or not exciting at all.
And to add on to that, Mike, so in addition to Khan Academy, we have some resources for blended learning here. I was not familiar with Caitlin Tucker. Had you known about this person? So she's written many books. One of them is Creatively Teach the Common Core Literacy Standards with Technology. Another is Blended Learning in Grades 4 through 12. And then the last is Blended Learning in Action. So those all sound like great books to check out. That's CaitlinTucker.com. And then there's StudySync.com that offers an extensive digital library with more than 1,200 classic and contemporary texts, just as you were referring to saving money on those texts. Both fiction and nonfiction, weekly writing practice, online writing and peer review, multimedia lessons, and standards-based assignments and assessments. That's StudySync.com.
This week's interview comes from Rebecca Johnson with Ravan East, a 5th grade teacher there. So go ahead, take a listen, and when you come back, we'll wrap it up together with our thoughts.
Thank you for having me. My name is Ravan East. I teach at Rebecca Johnson Elementary School. I've been teaching here for about 6 years, going on 7. I have been in education for a long time, though. I was a para for 6 years before that, and a private tutor for many years before that. So,
with being in education for a while and being a teacher here, and I think you said all of your years have been at Rebecca Johnson?
Most of them.
Most of them. So in your time teaching, when you first started, what kind of technology did you use in your classroom?
It was pretty basic. We pretty much just had the Elmo, which was the projector, and that was pretty much it. So we had different slides, and I could show different pages that I brought in, but nothing interactive.
Nothing interactive. So about 3 years ago, our district adopted Brightspace and started to adopt the one-to-one initiative. How has that changed how you teach in the classroom?
Tremendously. So now that every student has access to their own laptops and their own accounts, we're able to do pretty intensive research projects. We're also able to collaborate with each other, both on and offline. Students are able to access classwork and homework more easily, whether they're in class or absent that day. It really helps students be able to not only stay on task, but also move forward at their own pace. So it's really helped me differentiate a lot of my instruction.
Nice. And so with being in 5th grade, I remember when teaching 5th grade, there was just a lot of things that we had to keep up with. What has been one of your favorite tools that you've used?
So one of the best tools so far is OneNote. I've taken a liking to it, and I've been doing a lot of different things in the classroom with OneNote, not just between my colleagues and I, but also between my students and among the students as well.
So what kind of collaboration projects have you done with OneNote?
Different ones. Well, so each of my students, or each of my classrooms rather, have differentiated centers. We have 5 centers during that time, and I'm able to give out handouts, give out assignments, give out writing prompts to each one of those centers. And then in those centers, students are able to complete those assignments together and then hand them in together all on. Students are also able to edit each other's writing on OneNote, which they can share between each other, and then we can share in a whole group afterwards.
Nice. So one question that I've heard from OneNote, because I'm the person who gets a lot of those questions, is when students do their writing, do you have them do it in Word, or do you have them actually write straight in the notebook?
I have them do it in Word, and then they share their writing.
Through the OneNote?
Through OneNote.
So what benefits do you see to having them use Word first and then sharing that way?
One, I'm sure that they have their own copy of it, and they can make their own additions. You can see the final product that they were able to create themselves, as well as then also in addition to seeing other students' comments on them. I think it just helps them create more of an ownership of it, but honestly, we haven't really practiced too much doing it the other way. OneNote is still pretty new to us. So.
All right. So I noticed when I came in, you had Brightspace up on the board to direct students, so I'm guessing you use Brightspace?
Yes, quite often.
So what are some of the features of Brightspace that you really like?
So mostly at this point, I'm not as familiar with Brightspace as I would like to be. But right now, we're just using it mainly for assessments.
You're in 5th grade, and from what I remember my conversation with Mr. Gold, you guys are departmentalized, correct?
Yes.
So how has that been for managing like OneNote or managing the assessments that you've been doing?
It is somewhat challenging. I'm still working a lot of the kinks out as far as being able to access other students that aren't originally on my homeroom. So we are still working on that. As far as what my homeroom is able to do, they are at this point much farther along than the students that are not in my homeroom. But with saying that, we've been able to find ways around it. They still have their own OneNote accounts, and so they just have to make that extra step in sharing it with me and with each other. So we're still doing it. I think they just don't have access to all the different folders and files that I put onto OneNote, but I think it's going well.
Great. Being a teacher, I know you don't get to get out of the classroom much or at all. So from PDs that you've observed or your own personal inquiry, what are some things that you're excited to trying this year that you haven't started yet? I know we're like in the middle of November, so we're like halfway through, but there's still time.
As far as different programs or?
Yeah, different programs, different technology tools.
Okay, so, well, I just came back from a training for iReady. That's something that's pretty new to Rebecca Johnson. I realize that other schools in the district are already using it, so I'm very excited about that. It does seem to be very comprehensive and in tuned with individual students' needs, so that's great. Other things that I wanted to try are the Movie Maker. That seems pretty interesting. I would love for them to be able to create their own research projects. Right now we're doing an Ancient Civilizations project, so I know that they would love to have a movie or a skit that they could put online and broadcast that way.
Awesome. Since you've been teaching for the last 6 years, and then you've got your experience as a para and then as a tutor before that, for someone who is fresh out of college, signed up to teach in this district, what's one piece of advice you'd like to pass along to them?
One thing that I would tell them is that, that our students are a lot smarter, I think, than we give them credit for. They're also a lot more technologically savvy. For example, learning about Movie Maker, I know that there are a couple of students in my classroom that already are familiar with that program, and so I'm inviting them to present it to the class. I don't think that that is too much responsibility. I think that that's something that kids would love to do, and it encourages self-confidence as well as a drive to learn more, So as far as technology goes, I really do think that new teachers should take the time to really engage students in it and encourage them to find other programs that they can then share with the classroom.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll be looking forward to hearing more about what you're doing in the classroom.
Great, thank you.
So this week's interview was with Ravan East of Rebecca Johnson, and for our past 2 interviews, we've actually interviewed Ronnie Gold, the ILS there, and Amy Barron, a kindergarten teacher, so it was really interesting to hear from a 5th grade point of view in that same building. So we really kind of spanned the entire, I know we didn't get the middle grades as much, but we started with the young ones, and then we're up to the big kids in the school, I guess is one of the ways you would put it. So we kind of got to see a progression of things that they're doing. One of the things with Raven, it was really great to hear how they're using OneNote to collaborate, and then using the OneDrive and Word to share documents and work together that way on research projects.
Yeah, I loved, yet another enthusiastic example, Mike, of a teacher who's using technology successfully with her students, and she's able to have her differentiated centers. She's allowing the students to edit each other's writing, which I just have to believe they're much more enthusiastic about that task when they're able to do it online than on paper and pencil. And definitely the students who need to rewrite part of their essay or whatever it is they're working on, much easier to do on a computer than erasing half a page and rewriting.
Yeah, I know I prefer that, Suzanne. That's a great summary. It's really impressive to see how she's really kind of curtailed the tools to her course, to her class, and to her students. And that's kind of what we're looking for here at the district. There is no one size fits all. We offer a multitude of platforms and tools, and it's just great to see that she's really able to take advantage of that to the benefit of her students.
And even to hear what she was talking about when I asked her the question about what future things do you want to try, and she mentions Movie Maker, and then she's and I might even have the students teach the students, which I know when I was a student, anytime I had the opportunity to be up in front, I wholeheartedly took advantage of that because I felt I could do this well. And so just knowing that and knowing how 5th graders are, because that's the only grade I ever taught, that's kind of a big deal, especially to entrust them with saying, you're going to teach your classmates how to do this so that everybody can do this project, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mike. The self-confidence that they gain, as she mentioned, and the fact that it drives them to learn. Students are much more receptive to constructive criticism from their peers than from adults many times, and they want to be the best that they can be in front of their peers. So I just think it's a job well done. I appreciate her being willing to be interviewed.
So that was our interview with Ravan East of Rebecca Johnson School. And for our wrap-up today, we just want to remind you that you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher. You can find us through Yammer. I know that there's at least one person in the district who has Yammer up on their phone, and when they are driving to and from, whenever the new podcast opens up, they click right on their phone to listen to it so they can hear it in their car. And so you can listen to it through Yammer because we put the link there. Spreaker is the home website of it. You can find all of this in our news and announcements on Brightspace. And you can also even find the podcast on the We Learn page of MikeSPS. It's embedded there under the SPS Digital Learning Hour, which is what we are. We always want to hear your feedback, so please leave us messages on Yammer or email us at dlasupport@springfieldpublicschools.com. You could send us tweets. You could send us snail mail with the snow coming. You could also hop on some skis, and if you're at one of the schools that is like higher up on the hill, you could ski right on down to us and deliver us your comments that way. We're always willing to hear, so please leave us those messages. And if you do use iTunes or Spreaker or any of the sites where you can give a rating, please give us a rating there, because that helps us. It helps us continue in what we're doing, and it also helps us see that we do have people who are listening out there. And so we thank you for taking your time with us today. I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Zargis.
I'm Brendan Reed.
And we'll see you next week.